Everyone, it's Samantha, and I am kicking off a new series on my channel called Freezer Meal Friday. I'm going to be having a baby in February, and I wanted to have a set of freezer meals ready in the freezer. So every Friday leading up to baby's arrival, I plan on showing you guys how I'm going to stock my freezer. So I will probably continue this in some capacity after the baby's here because I'm not going to have as much time to cook with a new baby. But I'm going to start this out weekly and then we'll see where it goes once she's actually here. So today I'm going to make two recipes. The first one is going to be Swedish meatballs. I just found a recipe on Pinterest and doctored it just a little bit. So I will show you that first. I have made and froze meatballs plenty of times. This is just a new flavor combination I'm trying out this time. And then I'm going to form the rest of the ground beef into hamburger patties. All in all, I ended up getting 4 extra freezer meals plus a dinner the night I made this video. So that was 5 meals out of this almost 3-pound pack of ground beef. So let's go ahead and get started. To get started, I went ahead and put my ground beef into this bowl. I was going to save some of it, but I actually had a frozen piece in the middle. I had thawed it out in the fridge the night before, and it just was not thawed enough. So I'm going to save this ground beef, cover it in plastic wrap, and stick it in the fridge. And then I will make my hamburger patties the next day. So for the first day, I'm just making the meatballs, but I'm going to show you both in this video. So I'm going to use my mixer to mix up my meatballs. So I went ahead, set up my mixer. The first step of this Swedish meatball recipe is to dice up some onions and saute them. I went ahead and diced up my onion and started it sauteing in just a little bit of olive oil, and then I put the rest of the ingredients in my mixer. This is where I changed the recipe up just a little bit. I will link the original recipe down below so you can see the original, and I will also include the ingredients that I used. I just changed it up just a little bit. This recipe called for 2 egg yolks, and I forgot to separate the egg the first time, so I went ahead and just used my hands, then washed them really well. I already washed them really well before I started this, and then I cleaned up any of the egg mess that I made and washed my hands again. So now I'm ready to finish up the ingredients. The recipe also calls for a 1/2 cup of panko breadcrumbs, so I included that, and it calls for salt and pepper to taste. And I actually ended up using, I don't know, maybe a 1/2 teaspoon of salt and close to a 1/2 teaspoon of cracked black pepper. We really like pepper, so I used a bunch of that. I also added some parsley, and the original recipe did not call for parsley. I just really love parsley. Then a dash of ground nutmeg and a dash of allspice. Then my onions were all done, so I went ahead and added them in, and it's time for mixing. I decided to mix in my mixer just because it was super easy. I didn't have to worry about mixing it by hand, and it does a really good job just combining everything. It's super easy, and I didn't have to get my hands dirty with that part of it. So just got it mixed up just until everything's combined. You don't want to overmix it. It might make your meat tough if you overmix. I've never had that problem personally. Now it's time to scoop out the meatballs. So for this, I also cheat. I use my medium cookie scoop to scoop out these meatballs. When I'm scooping, I use one hand to clean up around the edges just so I don't have little meat bits. And then I keep the other hand clean, so if I need to touch something else, I have at least one clean hand. I don't have to keep going and washing my hands all the time. I just try to get all of these scooped, and somewhere in the middle of this part of the video, I take 12 of the meatballs and stick them in a skillet to start sauteing. I'm just using that same skillet that I had the onions in. I put a little bit more olive oil in there and started sauteing them. They are going to be for dinner, and this is what I was left with. I almost had 3 dozen meatballs from this about 2 pounds of ground beef, which is really good. That means I've got 2 more meals because between my husband and I, we can eat about a dozen of these. After I was done scooping these meatballs, I went ahead and wrapped this sheet in plastic wrap and stuck the whole sheet in the freezer. And once these meatballs are frozen, you pretty much have 2 options for cooking them. You can let them thaw in the fridge overnight, then saute them in a skillet like I'm about to show you, or you can just pop them right in the oven from the freezer. I cooked them on 350 for about 30 to 45 minutes, and I found that that's really good. The advantage of thawing them in the fridge first and then searing them in the skillet is you get that nice seared edge on the meatball, but the ones in the oven turn out perfectly fine as well, and it just makes it a whole lot easier to just pop them in the oven from the freezer. So let me show you the saute method now. So to cook these, all you do is you can sear them in a skillet. The recipe that I'm using from Pinterest says to sear them, and then you use this pot to make gravy. Then you stick them all back in the gravy and let them simmer until they're fully cooked. We usually do meatball subs with tomato sauce, so I plan on just heating up some tomato sauce in this skillet once these are seared a little bit, and I'll finish simmering these in the tomato sauce. Next up, I am making hamburgers. So my husband and I really like the thin style hamburgers like you get at like Five Guys. They're super duper thin. We've made these before and they are absolutely amazing. All you do is you get a little bit of meat. It doesn't take much. I've got about a pound of ground beef here and I was able to make 8 patties out of it. So I've got 8 pieces of plastic wrap out. I just rolled them into little balls and then flattened them just slightly. Now I washed my hands really good since I did have to touch the meat to make these meat patties, and I'm going to put a piece of saran wrap over each one of these patties and then flatten them. You want them to be super duper flat. I know it doesn't look like they're going to be big enough right now, but you want them super duper flat, like a 1/4 of an inch or less. I just flatten them with my hands. You could certainly use a rolling pin to make it a little bit easier. Let me show you. I'm just making it really flat, and it's going to end up being wider than a hamburger bun. But when these cook, they will start to kind of shrink up and get thicker as they cook, and then they will be the size of a hamburger bun. So it's okay that they look a little bit wide right now. They will turn out really, really nicely. We've done this before and they are just amazing. So I didn't even season the meat. You just season them when you cook them. And to cook these, all you do is you take them straight from the freezer, unwrap them from the plastic wrap, and stick them in your skillet. You just season both sides how you like to have your hamburgers, and that is it. They're super duper easy. You cook them straight from the freezer. I stuck these in a plastic bag with a label and a date, and now I'm going to my meatballs. These have been frozen overnight. This is the next day when I'm filming this, and again, I'm just going to stick these in a bag that I labeled. And I tried to use a ladle, a spoon scoop to get these off of the tray, but I ended up still touching them with my hands. I had to wash my hands again. I was hoping to avoid touching any of the meat. I don't really like wasting plastic bags all that much, so most of my freezer meals will end up in Tupperware dishes or glass dishes, and I'm not going to be using bags for most things, but I felt like using the bags was easy, especially with these meatballs, because then the bag can lay any shape that you want it to lay, and they'll fit in any kind of crevice I have left in my freezer. According to online, frozen ground beef like this can stay good in your freezer for about 6 months, so that's plenty of time for me to be able to use up these recipes once the baby is here. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I will be doing one of these every Friday, so be sure to join me for Freezer Meal Friday and subscribe. Thanks so much for watching and have a wonderful day. Bye.